The stars looked different from here. Commander Eric Mason stood at the viewport of the U.S. Valor, watching unfamiliar constellations drift by. Humanity's first diplomatic mission beyond the solar system had been underway for 3 months now. The ship hummed softly around him, a comforting sound that reminded him he wasn't alone in the vast emptiness of space. "Commander, we're picking up signals," Lieutenant Susan Grant said, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "Definitely artificial. Looks like we found someone." Mason nodded, his weathered face showing no emotion despite the historic moment. "Alert the crew. First contact protocols." The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. The signals grew stronger, and soon they made visual contact. The alien vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Valor, with a design that seemed to flow like liquid metal. "They're hailing us," Communications Officer Pete Johnson announced, eyes wide with excitement. "On screen," Mason ordered. The view screen flickered to life, revealing beings that looked surprisingly humanoid, though their skin had a bluish tint and their eyes were larger, completely black. They wore ornate uniforms with symbols Mason couldn't begin to decipher. "Greetings," Mason said, following the carefully rehearsed first contact speech. "We are representatives of Earth, coming in peace." The translation software worked frantically, converting his words into mathematical patterns that scientists hoped would be universal. There was a tense moment of silence before the aliens responded with similar patterns. "They call themselves the Viziri," Johnson said, reading the translation. "They're surprised to find us so far from our system. Tell them we're on a mission of peaceful exploration and wish to establish diplomatic relations," Mason replied. The Valor received permission to dock with the larger ship. Mason selected a small team: Grant, Johnson, Dr. Lisa Ward, and Security Officer Frank Cooper. They prepared for every contingency they could imagine, but nothing could have truly prepared them for setting foot on an alien vessel. The docking bay was cavernous and gleaming. A delegation of 6 Viziri waited for them, surrounded by what were clearly security personnel holding sleek devices that Mason immediately recognized as weapons. Universal concept, it seemed. "Remember," Mason whispered to his team, "no sudden movements." The initial exchange went well enough, despite the awkwardness of the translation delay. The Viziri seemed both fascinated and disturbed by the humans, especially by their varied eye colors and expressions. "They are asking about our biological makeup," Dr. Ward muttered after a particularly complex exchange. "I think they're confused by something." Mason stepped forward, offering a gesture of goodwill by extending his hand, palm open, a universal sign of carrying no weapons. The lead Viziri, who had introduced himself as Ambassador Krell, flinched backward. One of the Viziri security guards reacted instantly. There was a high-pitched whine, and before Mason could blink, a bolt of blue-white energy, plasma, based on their briefings, struck him directly in the chest. The human delegation froze in horror. The Viziri stepped back, clearly expecting Mason to fall. But Mason didn't fall. The blast had burned through his uniform, leaving a smoking hole. There was a red mark on his chest, but he remained standing. He winced, brushed at the smoldering fabric, and then continued the conversation, as if nothing had happened. "As I was saying, we hope this can be the beginning of a fruitful relationship between our peoples." The translation software conveyed his words, but the Viziri weren't listening. They were staring at him in disbelief. The security officer who had fired looked at his weapon, then back at Mason. "Sir," Grant whispered urgently, "are you all right?" Mason gave a tiny nod, maintaining his diplomatic composure. "Fine. Hurts like hell, but I'm not giving them the satisfaction." Word spread quickly through the Viziri ship. Crew members gathered at viewports and doorways to catch a glimpse of the human who had been shot with a plasma weapon and didn't even blink. Ambassador Krell's translator finally sputtered back to life. "You are not damaged?" Krell asked, dark eyes wide with something that might have been fear. Mason smiled thinly. It would take more than that to stop a conversation this important. That day, humanity made its mark on the galactic stage, not through technology or numbers, but through one man who refused to fall when he should have. News of the plasma incident spread through the Vizuri fleet like wildfire. Within hours, the Vizuri High Command had convened an emergency meeting. The human delegation had been escorted to guest quarters aboard the flagship, which many Vizuri now viewed as too generous. These creatures should be in containment, not guest suites, Fleet Commander Vex growled, pounding a blue fist on the conference table. You all saw the recording. The human took a direct hit from a military-grade plasma weapon and continued talking as if it were a minor inconvenience. Science Officer Zara, smaller than most Vizuri, and with markings that indicated advanced age, raised a hand to quiet the growing murmurs. I've analyzed the incident from multiple angles. The weapon definitely discharged at full power. The human's only protection was a thin cloth uniform. Could their skin be some kind of advanced armor? Asked Sub-Commander Trell. Zara shook her head. I managed to obtain their medical records from their ship's database. They freely shared them as part of our cultural exchange. She projected images of human anatomy onto the central display. Their skin is actually quite fragile compared to ours. They bruise and tear easily. Then explain how he survived, Vex demanded. Their physiology is unusual, Zara replied. They have remarkable healing capabilities. Their historical records show humans surviving incredible injuries, lost limbs, punctured organs, massive blood loss. They adapt to almost any environment. And most concerning, she paused, they seem to become stronger after surviving hardship. Aboard the U.S. Valor, Lieutenant Susan Grant was attempting to explain the situation to Commander Mason as Dr. Ward treated his injury. The Vizuri ambassador is requesting another meeting, Grant said. But he seems afraid. Mason winced as Ward applied a healing gel to his chest. The burn was painful but superficial. Afraid of us. That security guard's weapon was apparently lethal to their kind, Ward explained, sealing the bandage. Based on their medical data, that shot should have burned straight through your chest cavity. Mason frowned. So I got lucky. Not exactly, Ward said, looking uncomfortable. I've been comparing our physiologies. Humans are significantly more durable than the Vizuri in some ways. Our tissues are denser, our pain tolerance higher. You're saying we're naturally tougher than an advanced alien species? Grant asked incredulously. I'm saying we're different, Ward replied carefully. And differences can be frightening. Back in the Vizuri command room, Science Officer Zara had made another discovery. I found something in their genetic history, she said, zooming in on a DNA strand. Evidence of extensive modification generations ago. According to fragmentary records, humans were part of a biological adaptation program to prepare them for space travel. The program appears to have been abandoned, but the modifications remained in their genome. So they were engineered to be weapons, Vex concluded grimly. No, Zara corrected. They were engineered to survive. There's a difference. The Vizuri debate was interrupted when Ambassador Krell entered the chamber, looking disturbed. The human commander has requested to resume negotiations. He's waiting outside. Already? Vex asked in disbelief. The injury should have required days of recovery. When Mason entered the room, walking steadily with only the slightest stiffness, the Vizuri fell silent. He wore a fresh uniform, his posture straight, his expression calm. I believe we have much to discuss, Mason said simply. Later that day, Mason submitted to what the Vizuri called a routine medical examination. Grant objected strongly, but Mason overruled her. We need to build trust, he insisted. This is part of diplomacy. The examination was anything but routine. The Vizuri subjected Mason to tests of endurance, strength, and pain tolerance, all disguised as standard procedures. To their growing alarm, Mason's results exceeded their predictions at every turn. These readings can't be correct, one Vizuri scientist muttered to another. No species should be able to function under these conditions. When Mason rejoined his team, Grant pulled him aside. "Sir, I've been monitoring Vizuri communications. They're transmitting data about you to their military. They're calling us a potential threat." Mason sighed. "I was afraid of that. Prepare the crew. This first contact just got complicated." Across the Vizuri fleet, the message was the same. The humans are too dangerous. They must not be allowed free travel in the galaxy. Word traveled fast in space. Within 3 days of the plasma incident, the news had reached the Galactic Coalition, a loose alliance of 17 spacefaring species. The coalition had existed for over 200 years and controlled most of the known galaxy. The arrival of humans, especially humans with unusual physical abilities, was cause for immediate attention. "The Vizuri report is most concerning," said Zelfar, the insect-like representative of the Morak species. The Coalition Council chamber was filled with beings of various shapes and sizes, all focused on the central display showing footage of Commander Mason being hit by the plasma weapon. "We should not rush to judgment," countered Clyrix, ambassador of the Tavis, a species that resembled large mantises. "This could simply be a natural adaptation we have not encountered before." Ambassador Kevin Richards and diplomatic specialist Laura Wells arrived at Coalition headquarters aboard a small shuttle from the U.S. Valor. They had been summoned without explanation and were understandably nervous. "Remember, we know nothing about their political structure," Wells whispered as they were led through vast corridors. "Let me do most of the talking." Richards nodded. He was a career diplomat, but had never expected to represent Earth to an entire galactic community. The pressure was immense. The humans were brought before the Council, 17 different species all staring at them, with what Richards could only guess were expressions of curiosity and suspicion. "Representatives of Earth," a translator device intoned, "you have entered Coalition space without invitation or prior agreement. Explain yourselves." Wells stepped forward smoothly. "We are explorers seeking peaceful contact with other intelligent life. We had no knowledge of your coalition or its boundaries." The council members exchanged looks. A tall, gray-skinned being spoke next. "Your Commander Mason has demonstrated unusual resilience to energy weapons. Is this common among your species?" Richards felt a chill. So that was what this was about. "Humans are adaptable," he replied carefully. "We evolved on a planet with many dangers, but we come seeking friendship, not conflict." While the council session continued, Mason and Grant made a disturbing discovery aboard the Vizuri ship. Grant had managed to access some of their databases using the translation protocols. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, showing Mason a series of files. "The Coalition species have been testing weapons on each other, not just studying them, actively developing them for use against specific physiologies." Mason frowned. "You're saying this peaceful coalition is actually preparing for war?" "Not with each other," Grant clarified. "These weapons are designed for something else, something they fear." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a new alien ship. Unlike the flowing lines of Vizuri vessels, this one was all sharp angles and weapon ports. "Draxians," explained their Vizuri guide, clearly uncomfortable. "They are difficult." The Draxians, it turned out, were longtime rivals of the Vizuri. Upon hearing about the humans, they had come to make their own assessment. Their ambassador, a red-scaled humanoid named Krav, approached Richards after the council session. "Your species interests us," Krav said bluntly. "The Vizuri fear you. This is good. We propose an alliance." Richards was diplomatic but non-committal. "We are still learning about this region of space. We make no exclusive agreements yet." Back on the Valor, the command team met to assess their increasingly complicated situation. "The Draxians want us as weapons," Wells reported. "The Vizuri want us contained. The council is divided. And someone is stockpiling weapons designed for specific species," Mason added grimly. Richards rubbed his temples. "We came looking for friends, and found ourselves in the middle of a Cold War. "What's our next moves, sir?" Grant asked. "We continue diplomatic efforts," Mason decided, "but we also prepare for the worst. If these species decide humans are too dangerous to be free, they may try to do something about it." Little did they know, the Council was already planning exactly that. In a private chamber, 7 of the 17 representatives had gathered to discuss a special test for Commander Mason, one designed to discover the true limits of human endurance. The cultural exchange demonstrations were clearly tests, though no one admitted it openly. Commander Mason stood in a large circular chamber, surrounded by various coalition representatives and scientists. This was the 5th such demonstration in 3 days. "Now, Commander, we will show you how our species practices physical training," said Zelfar of the Morax. The insectoid being's mandibles clicked in what Mason was beginning to recognize as nervousness. "Of course," Mason replied politely. "I'm happy to learn." What followed was not training but an endurance challenge that would have killed most beings. The gravity in the chamber increased to 3 times Earth normal. Mason felt his legs strain and his breathing become difficult, but he remained standing. The Morax representatives chittered in surprise. "Interesting," said a voice from the observation deck. "Most species collapse at twice their home gravity." 2 human scientists, Alan Burke and Olivia Reyes, had been invited to observe and comment on the cultural exchanges. In reality, they were studying Mason's reactions just as closely as the aliens were. "They're pushing him deliberately," Reyes whispered to Burke. "This isn't cultural exchange, it's a stress test." Burke nodded. "The commander knows it too. Look at his face." Mason's expression remained neutral, but a thin sheen of sweat covered his forehead as the gravity finally returned to normal. He had passed yet another test. Back on the U.S. Valor, Lieutenant Grant was growing increasingly concerned. "They've had him for 3 days now. These demonstrations are getting more extreme." Richard sighed. "I know, but refusing would be seen as hostile. We need to play along until we understand what they really want." "What they want is to find out if we're too dangerous to live," Grant replied bluntly. In the science lab, Dr. Ward was reviewing data from Mason's medical monitor, which he wore disguised as a standard fleet insignia. His vitals are strong despite what they're putting him through. In fact, his cellular regeneration rate seems to be increasing with each test. "What does that mean?" Richards asked. "It means," Ward said slowly, "that the commander is actually getting stronger." The next day brought a new accident during a tour of a Draxian military vessel. A coolant pipe ruptured, spraying Mason with caustic fluid that would have dissolved the outer membranes of most coalition species. Mason suffered chemical burns, but remained conscious and alert, even helping contain the leak before accepting medical attention. The Viziri delegation was livid. "This is the 3rd accident in 2 days," Ambassador Krell protested to the Coalition Council. "The humans are being subjected to deliberate hazards." "We are merely observing their capabilities," replied the Draxian representative dismissively. "No permanent harm has come to them." "Not yet," Krell muttered. That evening, Mason was approached by Clyrix, the Tavis ambassador who had spoken in defense of humans at the earlier council meeting. "Commander, I must warn you," Clyrix said, mandibles twitching in agitation. "Tomorrow, the council plans a final test. They will expose you to multiple weapon systems simultaneously." Mason's eyes narrowed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," Clyrix replied, "my species once faced similar scrutiny. We were nearly exterminated because of fear. I would not see this happen again." Mason thanked the ambassador and immediately contacted the Valor. "Grant, I need you to prepare for possible emergency extraction. And contact Earth. Tell them." He paused, choosing his words carefully on an open channel. "Tell them we may need to activate Protocol Omega." The next morning, Mason entered the testing chamber for what the Coalition called the final cultural exchange. Inside, He found 7 different weapons systems arranged in a circle, each operated by a different species representative. "Today," announced the head of the council, "we will determine the true extent of human resilience." Mason stood in the center of the circle, his face betraying no emotion. He had survived everything they had thrown at him so far, but this was different. This wasn't testing. This was judgment. "Begin," ordered the council leader. The weapons powered up around him, humming with deadly energy. Mason took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. Whatever happened next would determine humanity's place in the galaxy. The weapons fired simultaneously. Plasma, energy beams, sonic waves, and chemical sprays all converged on Commander Mason. The observation room fell silent as the barrage hit. Surely no being could survive such an assault. When the weapons stopped, Mason was still standing. His uniform was in tatters, his skin burned and bleeding in places, but his eyes were clear and focused. He looked directly at the council leader. "Is that all?" he asked, his voice rough but steady. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Some representatives backed away in fear, while others shouted for restraints. Scientific instruments across the room recorded Mason's vital signs, which should have been failing but instead showed his body already beginning to heal. 2 hours later, the coalition voted. Humanity was officially classified as a Level 2 threat species. The designation meant severe travel restrictions, constant military monitoring, and most alarmingly, the right of coalition forces to contain humans if deemed necessary. Ambassador Richards received the news with outward calm, but his hands trembled slightly as he contacted Earth. "They've made their decision. It's not good." Captain Samantha Kelly, commander of Earth's Rapid Response Team, received the emergency transmission aboard her ship, the U.S. Defender. "All units prepare for immediate departure," she ordered. "Our people need extraction." Meanwhile, the U.S. Valor was surrounded by coalition ships. A formal request had been delivered. Commander Mason was to be surrendered for further study. The Valor's acting captain, Lieutenant Grant, had refused. "He's a Federation officer, not a lab specimen," she told the coalition representative. Request denied. On Earth, governments scrambled to respond to the crisis. Humanity had ventured into space expecting wonder and discovery. Instead, they faced fear and potential conflict. In a secure bunker beneath Geneva, top military and scientific leaders gathered. "Protocol Omega is now in effect," announced Admiral Joe Price. "All Sol system defenses, activate. All deep space exploration teams, go dark." Back on the coalition station, Commander Mason was being treated for his injuries. Dr. Ward worked quickly, applying regenerative compounds to the worst burns. "They're going to take you away," she whispered. "I heard the guards talking. They consider you too valuable as a research subject to release." Mason nodded slightly. "I figured as much. Is the emergency transmitter ready?" Ward slipped a small device into his hand. "Ready. But they'll detect it if you activate it here." "I'll find a way," Mason replied. In the diplomatic wing, Richards was making one last effort to prevent disaster. He requested an emergency session of the full Coalition Council. To everyone's surprise, they granted it. Richards stood before the gathered representatives of 17 advanced species, alone and unarmed. The room had a tense, almost hostile air. "Members of the Council," he began, "today you've labeled humanity as a threat based on fear and misunderstanding. You've seen our physical resilience and assumed it means we are dangerous." He paused, looking around the room. "Throughout human history, we've faced oppression based on fear of difference. Time and again, we discovered that what makes us different can also make us stronger together. Commander Mason survived your weapons not because humans are weapons, but because we've evolved to endure." Some council members shifted uncomfortably. Others remained stone-faced. "You're making the same mistake our ancestors made countless times," Richards continued. "You're assuming different means dangerous. You're planning to cage us, study us, control us. I'm here to tell you that humans don't respond well to cages. The Drexian representative laughed harshly. Is that a threat, Ambassador? It's a fact of biology. Richards replied calmly. Like any living thing, we fight hardest when cornered. As Richards spoke, Captain Kelly's extraction fleet exited hyperspace at the edge of the system. The U.S. Defender led 5 heavily armed ships toward the Coalition station. And deep within Earth's orbit, ancient defense platforms, hidden from all detection, began powering up. Systems that had lain dormant for centuries came online, responding to Protocol Omega's activation code. The first shots were fired when a Coalition vessel attempted to block the U.S. Defender's approach. The galactic community was about to learn why classifying humans as a threat had been a self-fulfilling prophecy. Major Ben Harper stood on the bridge of the CSS Nightshade, a ship that officially didn't exist. Around him, 11 other stealth vessels moved into position. For 3 years, they had been exploring unknown regions of space, carefully avoiding detection by any alien civilization. All ships reporting ready, sir, his communications officer said. Protocol Omega is confirmed. Harper nodded grimly. Activate jump drives. Let's remind the Coalition that humans don't like being cornered. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been secretly mapping star systems suddenly changed course. The dormant network Harper commanded had been humanity's insurance policy, a contingency plan for hostile first contact. Now, that plan was being activated. Back on Earth, Dr. Paul Wright was briefing world leaders about a long-buried secret. His hand shook slightly as he displayed ancient files on the main screen. The modification program wasn't abandoned, he explained. It was completed. Then it was hidden. The room fell silent as government officials digested this revelation. Are you saying all humans are modified? Asked the Secretary General. Wright nodded. Every human born in the last 300 years carries these genetic enhancements. They were designed to activate gradually, particularly under stress or threat. Why wasn't this public knowledge? Demanded another official. Because the modifications weren't made to help us survive space, Wright replied quietly. They were made to help us survive war. In orbit around the Coalition headquarters, the U.S. Defender engaged 3 enemy vessels simultaneously. Captain Kelly's voice remained steady as she issued commands. Evasive pattern Delta. Target their engines only, she ordered. We're here to extract our people, not start a war. The Coalition had never seen human ships in combat. They were unprepared for the Defender's speed and maneuverability. Kelly's tactical skills had earned her command of the rapid response team, and now those skills were on full display. Ma'am, we've created an opening, her tactical officer reported, but it won't last long. Kelly opened a channel to the U.S. Valor. Lieutenant Grant, prepare for immediate departure. We'll cover you. On the Valor, Grant was organizing a daring plan of her own. Dr. Ward, stay with the ship. Johnson, Cooper, you're with me. We're going to extract the commander and any Coalition sympathizers. That's suicide, Johnson protested. The station is crawling with security. Grant checked her sidearm. Then we'll have to be quick. While Grant prepared her rescue mission, Coalition scientist Olivia Rice made a fateful decision. She had been studying Mason since his arrival and had grown increasingly disturbed by the Council's methods. I can help you escape, she told Mason in the medical bay, but you have to trust me. Mason studied her carefully. Why would you turn against your own people? Because I've reviewed your species' historical records, Rice replied. Your people have made terrible mistakes, but you learned from them. The Coalition is about to make a mistake it can't undo. Together, they slipped past the guards. Rice knew the station's layout and security protocols, making their progress swift and silent. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, humanity's defenses were revealing themselves to be far more sophisticated than anyone had expected. Ancient orbital platforms, disguised as small moons or asteroids, deployed weapons systems that matched or exceeded Coalition technology. This is impossible, breathed a Viziri commander as their scanners detected the platforms. Their technology is primitive. They shouldn't have these capabilities. The Viziri had launched a preemptive strike against Earth's orbital defenses, expecting an easy victory. Instead, their lead ships were now disabled and drifting. In a secure communications room, Mason finally managed to activate his emergency transmitter. The signal reached Major Harper's fleet just as they prepared to jump. "Sir," Harper's communications officer called out, "it's Commander Mason. He's alive, and he's sending coordinates." Harper smiled grimly. "Well then, let's go get our man." Little did either Mason or Harper know that a discovery awaited them, one that would change their understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The Coalition security forces never saw Commander Mason coming. He moved through the station with a speed and strength that shocked even him. When 4 armed guards blocked a corridor, Mason didn't hesitate. He charged forward, dodging energy bolts that seemed to move in slow motion compared to his enhanced reflexes. "This isn't normal," he muttered to Reyes as they slipped into a maintenance tunnel. "I've never moved like this before." Reyes looked at him with a mixture of fear and fascination. "The stress of the weapons tests must have triggered something in your biology. You're evolving." Back on Earth, Dr. Wright was explaining more about humanity's hidden past. He pulled up ancient star charts that predated human spaceflight by thousands of years. "These were found in archaeological digs across 6 continents," he said. "They all showed the same thing. Earth was once a battlefield in a war between precursor species." The Secretary General leaned forward. "What does this have to do with our current crisis?" "Everything," Wright replied. "Humans weren't modified to survive space. We were modified to be soldiers in that ancient war. When it ended, the victors left. But their changes to our DNA remained." On the CSS Nightshade, Major Harper received an urgent transmission from Earth. After reading it, he gathered his officers. "New orders," he announced. "We're not just extracting our people. We need to recover data from the Coalition main archives. Apparently, they've been studying Earth for centuries." Lieutenant Grant's rescue team had nearly reached the medical bay when they ran into Mason and Reyes coming from the opposite direction. The reunion was brief but emotional. "Sir, you look different," Grant said, noticing Mason's changed appearance. His muscles seemed denser, his movements more fluid. "I feel different," Mason admitted, "but we need to focus on getting out of here." Reyes interrupted. "There's something you need to see first. The real reason the Coalition fears humans." She led them to a secure data center and used her clearance to access classified files. "Several species have been monitoring Earth for over a millennium. They've been watching your wars, your adaptability, your resilience." The screens displayed surveillance of human history, ancient battles, modern conflicts, natural disasters, and humanity's consistent survival against overwhelming odds. "They've been studying us like lab rats," Grant said in disgust. "No," Reyes corrected. "They've been studying you like weapons. Because that's what you were designed to be." Meanwhile, Olivia Reyes had downloaded critical information to a data crystal. "Take this. It contains evidence that the Viziri High Command has been infiltrated by another species, a species no one in the Coalition has seen before." As the humans prepared to escape, Mason had a chance meeting that would change everything. Clyrix, the Tavis ambassador who had warned him about the tests, was waiting at a junction point. "Commander, I've been searching for you." Clyrix's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You must know the truth. The Viziri aren't acting alone. They're being controlled." "By who?" Mason asked. Before Clyrix could answer, an energy beam struck him from behind. As the ambassador fell, Mason caught a glimpse of their attacker, a being unlike any he had seen in the Coalition. It had pale, translucent skin and eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The attacker fled, but not before Mason noticed a symbol on its uniform, the same symbol that appeared in Dr. Wright's ancient star charts. As alarms blared across the station, Mason made a decision. Grant, get everyone to the extraction point. I'm going after that thing. Sir, that's not the mission, Grant protested. Mason's eyes had a new intensity. The mission just changed. I think I just saw what we were created to fight against. With reflexes and strength he never knew he possessed, Mason sprinted after the mysterious attacker. The genetic modifications dormant in his DNA for generations were now fully awake, transforming him into what he was always meant to be, a guardian against an ancient enemy that had returned to the galaxy. The being led Mason deep into the station, to areas not shown on any official maps. They moved with incredible speed, but Mason kept pace, his body now operating at levels no human had displayed before. The chase ended in a vast chamber filled with strange equipment and glowing containment fields. "Welcome, human," the creature said, turning to face Mason. Its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We've waited a long time for one of you to awaken." "Who are you?" Mason demanded, staying alert for any attack. "We are the Excellinar, the ones your kind was created to fight." The being's skin rippled, changing color slightly. "The ones who have been controlling this galaxy from the shadows for millennia." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Grant and her team had reached the extraction point where Captain Kelly's forces had secured a docking bay. Grant contacted Major Harper's fleet. "Commander Mason is pursuing an unknown hostile," she reported. "He believes it's connected to humanity's genetic modifications." Harper's voice came through clearly. "We've decoded the data Rice provided. The Excellinar have been manipulating species against each other for thousands of years. They're behind the Coalition's fear of humans." Across the station, fighting had broken out between Coalition forces as the truth began to spread. Some still wanted to contain the humans, while others now recognized the real threat. In the hidden chamber, Mason faced the Excellinar. "Why did you lead me here?" "To show you what you're fighting for." The beam gestured to a central control panel. "This station isn't just Coalition headquarters. It's a weapon, designed to sterilize entire star systems. We've built one in every sector of the galaxy." The Excellinar moved with blinding speed, activating the controls. Screens lit up showing Earth and targeting crosshairs. "Your species was engineered by our ancient enemies as the perfect warriors," the Excellinar continued. "When we defeated them, we should have destroyed you too. Instead, we hid your true nature from you, hoping you would destroy yourselves." Mason lunged forward, but energy barriers sprang up around him. The Excellinar laughed, a chilling sound. "Too late, human. Watch as your homeworld burns." What the Excellinar didn't expect was the arrival of a joint human coalition force. Grant had convinced several species to join their cause after sharing Raya's evidence. They burst into the chamber, led by Clarix, who had survived the earlier attack. "The station defenses are down," Clarix announced. "Your ships have control of the weapon systems." The Excellinar hissed in fury and attacked, moving faster than most eyes could follow. But Mason was ready. As the alien fired a disintegration weapon directly at him, Mason did something that shocked everyone present. He caught the energy blast in his bare hand. The plasma swirled around his fingers, causing pain but no permanent damage. Mason smiled grimly at the Excellinar's stunned expression. "You made a mistake," he said calmly. "You tested us with everything you had. All you did was make us stronger." With a motion almost too fast to see, Mason redirected the energy back at the control panel, destroying the targeting system. The Excellinar shrieked in rage and fled, disappearing through a hidden portal that sealed behind it. In the aftermath, Earth's defense systems demonstrated capabilities that shocked even human commanders. It became clear that ancient guardians had left humanity with more than just modified DNA. They had left weapons and technology hidden throughout the solar system. 1 month later, a new galactic compact was formed. Humanity was reclassified, not as a threat, but as guardians, genetic inheritors of an ancient protector race designed to defend the galaxy against the Excellinar influence. On a training field at the new Joint Military Academy, Commander Mason watched as human and alien cadets practiced together. Despite everything, peace had been found through understanding. A young cadet approached him nervously. "Sir, they say you can deflect plasma with your bare hands. Is that true?" Mason smiled and held out his palm. A coalition instructor fired a practice plasma bolt directly at him. Mason didn't flinch as the energy danced harmlessly across his skin. The cadets gasped in amazement, but Mason simply shrugged. "The trick isn't being invulnerable," he told them. "The trick is being willing to stand your ground when the shots start coming." He looked out at the stars, where Zelnar still lurked in the shadows. "And trust me, they will come again."